Good morning. How is everyone? Good, good. I'm so pleased to welcome you to New Lab. My name is Riley Hall. I am the general manager here at New Lab Detroit, stepping in for Katie Sovin, who's the managing director who you'll see on the screen. But Riley Hall, please find me, ask me questions after. I know that you all had a beautiful reception at Michigan Central Station last night. Can I get a woohoo? Yeah, pretty inspiring over there. So while this building may not stand as tall, we like to think that we're sturdier over here at New Lab. I hope you find this space no less inspiring than you found the station last night. This building was built by Albert Kahn in 1923, and it was originally a warehouse for mail from the station. So the mail would come into the train station, would be stored over here, and then distributed out through Detroit. Then a warehousing servicing moment in the 50s for the Detroit Public Schools. So this became the book depository building, where it stored all of the public school books and school materials that were collected at the end of each year and then distributed back out into Detroit. So this is a history of a hardworking place, of a lot of people moving through, of storage, yes, but more so service and in connection to the community. And that story feels like a perfect introduction for what New Lab is and what we're trying to do here in Detroit. We're an organization in service of founders that are tackling incredibly hard and important problems and doing it connected to others, rooted here in the city of Detroit. New Lab's a collective of innovators, entrepreneurs, artists, and activists that believe that the only way to realize a vision is to build it and put it out in the community. Connect that technology with the community and understand how it builds on the culture of Detroit. So we're focused on fostering the roots that already exist in Detroit, right? Taking the native Detroit talent and building their ideas and collaboration here in our building. In addition, we help people put roots down here in Detroit. We have already attracted companies from California, Colorado, Belgium, the Netherlands to really come here, land in Detroit, expand the economic opportunity of the city, but also grow their business in the same process. New Lab does 4 things. We foster communities that enable founders to build something that not only should exist, but can exist. We build infrastructure and accelerate real-world solutions to problems via pilots. We lead coalitions to solve global challenges, specifically around climate change and hard, deep technology. And then 4th, we invest into early-stage companies where our capital and our system has the highest impact. So as you spend time here today, I hope that you take a minute to see what we're building, interact with some startups, understand some of the technology that we've deployed in the area. On 14th Street, you'll see the United States' first electric charging road. So this is a road where electric vehicles can drive over the road, and there's infrastructure built into the physical street to charge that electric vehicle as it drives across the road. In the lower level of this building, you'll see makers. They're making trikes, bikes, motorcycles, ATVs, expanding the form factors of electric vehicle options to decrease carbon impact of combustion engines. And when I say making, I mean, yes, physically manufacturing here in the space, turning wrenches, cutting metal, putting pieces together. So with that, New Lab is honored to be a chapter in the storied history of this building. We hope that not only the space, but the community here can provide an inspiring backdrop for the next 2 days of your programming. Thank you, and please welcome Asima back to the stage.
Thank you, Riley. Good morning, everyone. I love the fact that this is a space, as you said, for founders, for things that should exist. I think for all of you, there's a lot of founders here that are doing that in their community as well, also solving for issues of climate change, thinking about what it looks like to embed that in their own communities. So we have a full day today. I'm really pleased to see all of you here this morning. What a wonderful event we had last night. And I thought, as just to kick us off, for you all to, this is an invite-only event. We curate the audience. I say this at every symposium. For us, it's really important that you can turn to any person you are next to, introduce yourself, and there is something that you have of value for learning for them and that they have to share with you. It is a community that is primarily infrastructure reuse leaders in nonprofit organizations, but it's also the people that we rely on to support that work. Municipal leaders, consultants, academics, thought leaders. So I encourage you to meet as many people as you can. As a starting point, who's been to 3 symposiums? All 3. Who's been to 2? Nice. This is their first symposium? Oh, welcome. Wonderful. I'm very excited to have all of you here and joining our special community. Who has a park project that is in development or construction? So we have a lot of early stage projects, and who's got one that's up and running right now? Wonderful. So it looks like it's about 50-50. So you'll find someone that's going through the same thing as you in this room. So I want to welcome another first-timer to the stage now. It is the Executive Director of the Highline, Alan Van Capel.
I felt like I was going to be so out of place because I was like, everybody's been here 9 million times and I haven't, and I went to Mexico City to the policy lab, so it was nice to see everybody's hands go up, or so many people's hands go up. I'm Alan Van Capel. I get to run the Highline in New York. It is such a pleasure to be here today, and I really want to begin by thanking Asima, your incredible leadership of the Highline Network. Doesn't she do like the most incredible job? And she does, this isn't like the only thing she does. And you could have a question about any project and she could tell you what stage of development you're in or what challenge you're having. And she just owns this with such passion every single day. And we are so fortunate to have you in our orbit. So thank you. Let's give it up for Asima, please. And also to the incredible team of people who helped plan today's and events and tomorrow's as well. This is such a great gathering. Thank you all for being here, and thanks for being here in this wonderful city of Detroit. I feel like I get to be here every few years, and every few years I come back, something's different, something's changed, and it's so exciting to see what's happening in this city. It's also exciting to see all this knowledge and passion convene in one singular place. And as I was making my way around the reception last night, I was struck by what a gift it is to have this time together, to have an opportunity to learn with each other and to also dream big with one another. You know, there was a guy, I'm not going to name you, but you know who you are, who called me last week and 2 weeks ago and said, as a throwaway line, I literally was like, I'll see you in Detroit. He's like, I'm not coming to Detroit. He said, I have so much stuff on my plate right now. I'm like underwater. I'm trying to raise this last bit of money. Like, it's not going to happen. And I was like, what are you doing? This is like a gift to be in a place with like-minded people, with people you don't agree with on everything, with people in different stages, to actually just sit and be with your fellowship. Like, that is why we come here. And I said, if you come here, I promise you will leave. And I've never been here before. But I know that if you come here, you will leave more recharged, more energized to do the work back in your home city. I love having the opportunity to meet people who are doing things differently than how we're doing them, to learn about how we can make our project, the Highline in New York, even better. Because what might have started as us trying to show folks what we did, we learn now more than I think that we're giving sometimes. And it's so valuable for us to be here. So I hope that you will, like me, treat these next few days as a real gift, and think about what you want to leave here with. So someone here is going to have a missing piece that you're looking for to help you reassess the game you're playing back home. But also think about the gifts and talents you have to offer other people in this room and in this space today. Find a person or an organization less established than you are, and see if you can offer them some guidance, some wisdom, some lesson of your experience that can help move them forward. And make sure you take advantage of all of the tours and the opportunities we've set up to explore this magnificent city. Detroit provides so many examples of transformative power of developing public spaces that are rooted in the needs and the voices of its very diverse communities, which is the theme of this year's symposium, Rooted. And to succeed, our projects need to be rooted in community. And we here are a community in this room. We're a fellowship, a community of individuals and organizations and exciting projects in different phases of development all across. This network, our network, allows us to come together and make sure these projects are not isolated endeavors, but a movement growing in knowledge and expertise and in experience. And I also just want to say that I believe that our work has the ability to have a profound impact on the fabric and the culture of our country. That's why I'm so committed to supporting and strengthening the Highline Network as it moves forward. It is not insignificant. All I did today was turn on the TV in my hotel room this morning, and all you see is political ad after political ad. It is poignant that we're here in Michigan in 2024, a battleground state in the upcoming election. And no matter how you feel about the election or about politics or about the issues on the ballots across the country, you cannot escape this pervasive feeling of polarization across our cities, our towns, our communities. We are so divided in every aspect sometimes, it feels. But parks and public spaces, the ones that we are creating, those are the places where people have an opportunity to come together. Those are the places where people see each other's humanity. You know, I said the other day, my husband and our two kids went to the Mets playoff game last night. Go Mets! And I've always felt this about baseball parks, and I feel it about ours as well. When you're sitting in a stand at Citi Field, we're all rooting for the same team. Nobody's talking about who you're voting for in an election. No one's talking about where you stand on this issue or on that issue. The only thing we're doing is rooting for a home run. And there aren't that many places anymore in our society where different groups of people from across the political and ideological spectrum can gather in a singular place and just hold and share space with each other, to see each other's humanity. You know, we may be thinking about the elections, but the answer to what happens to our country after the elections, that's in the new town squares that we are building and operating. That is where that healing and that work takes place. And if we do it well, if we root our projects in the communities, plural, in which they are situated, if we find the unlikely allies to be our partners in those projects, the people who we may not agree with on this issue or that issue, but in this we do, if we can find that humanity and common ground, then our projects really are going to be the new town squares of this country and have truly a transformative and major impact. And so that's why I'm so excited here. And so let's get started. In the Highline Symposium tradition, we kick off the first full day with a keynote from our local partner. So I am so thrilled to welcome Rachel Frierson, the Vice President of Operations and Programs, to introduce to us the Detroit Riverfront and all of the projects that are happening within it. So please, let's give her a round of applause.
Hey, good morning. It is lovely to see all these folks in Detroit. I want to first give out a shout out to the Highline Network for bringing you all here. And then I want to give a shout out to these lovely volunteers that you saw wearing the green shirts as you walked in. Because those people dedicate more than 5,000 hours to the Riverfront Conservancy each year to participate in our programs and all of our public spaces, and they are some of the best advocates for our work. So talk to them. I'm sure they've already talked to you about how much they love Detroit, so I just want to make sure you give them a thanks. I also want to thank all the Detroiters in this room who are also showcasing their spaces. That's a lot of time, a lot of energy, but we've been able to do incredible things together, and you will see that in the next 2 days here in Detroit. So, with that note, as I said, I'm Rachel Frierson. I'm the Vice President of Programming and Operations at the Riverfront Conservancy. We're a nonprofit that was founded in 2003. We were founded with 3 key partners: General Motors, the Kresge Foundation, and the City of Detroit. Really, it was a moment of opportunity. As we'll run through some slides, you'll see that Detroit was ripe for an opportunity to transform our riverfront. Because for years, our back was turned. It was really an industrial site, really for shipping and all those things, but our residents didn't have access to the riverfront. A lot of these images that you'll see, they'll feel like maybe they were generations ago, but really, if you're under 30, you've seen these, or over 30, you've seen these on the riverfront. This is Atwater Street. This is now the hub of activity, so if you come on the tour with us, you'll see this space. Covered with aggregate, this is what so many people have memories of being in Detroit and its riverfront. And then we created barriers. This is the Renaissance Center. This is actually where our offices are located. General Motors purchased the Renaissance Center in 1997, but as you guys can see in this photo, there are these 3 concrete barricades. The real goal was that people from the suburbs could drive into the city, enjoy this mall experience, and drive right out and never have to experience Detroit. That's what they thought was Renaissance, right? And so our goal was to transform and tear down those barriers to really open up this access. We gave cars, as a Motor City, the best view of the riverfront, right? And again, still people might like that. Anyways, but yeah, I mean, this is what people would experience, and this is how you'd connect to our river. So, as you said, it's really all about this moment of opportunity. You saw those pictures of those piles of aggregate. We also haven't had a lot of residents in the Rivertown area because it was a working warehouse district. So we have all these train lines that have been, abandoned at that point. This is at a Quinder Cut in its original form. It marks the eastern border of a historic Black Bottom neighborhood, a neighborhood that was destroyed by urban renewal. And this train line had really gone back to nature. It also had become a place where we saw our artists reclaim with graffiti murals and all those things down there. But again, this path, and this could be an opportunity for us to bring residents into the riverfront. Again, right where we're standing, the Southwest Greenway, which leads right off of the back of this building, had returned to nature, as you can see here, a train line from Canada running underneath. And just in 2018, again, we were thinking about how what the opportunities we could have together to bring our community down to the river. So we started talking back in 2003, started knocking on doors at City Hall, started asking the city to take the land that they had originally set aside for casinos to say, let's open it up to public access. We had more than 150 community meetings across church basements and in houses and apartments, and really asking people to imagine something they had never seen before, right? I think what's so exciting about us all coming here is we are having this opportunity to learn from each other. But when we take ourselves back maybe 20 plus years ago, we have this sense that someone's already seen this somewhere. They've been to these other cities where they've seen riverfronts, et cetera. But we really had to make sure that this was going to come from their voice and their thought process. And you can't just slap a riverfront from San Antonio onto the riverfront in Detroit. And so we did that by having these conversations together, and those conversations continue. So it led us to this promise that we made together. A promise that we would create a continued riverfront from bridge to bridge, running from our MacArthur Bridge, the bridge to Belle Isle, the city's Island Park on the east, all the way to a bridge I'm sure you can see out that window, which is the Ambassador Bridge on the west. A continued riverfront. What that meant is all those piles of aggregate, those cement silos, residents that were had private riverfront access, all had to make a decision together to come together to give us this continued access. So far, we have 3.5+ miles of continued riverfront, and we've delivered on this promise that we wanted to create a beautiful, exciting, safe, accessible, world-class gathering place for all. And the all is so important to us because those folks who were in that church basement, they had to feel like this was a place for them. Again, back turned to the riverfront, deep access. We have lots of remediation and the like. But we have generations that are going to learn and be able to come to this riverfront and not remember those other moments. So when we think about our riverfront, we really think about we've got this beautiful asset, but really it's the people who make it come alive. So we connect people in place all the time, and we do that through active programming. Lots of it hosted by our own team, and lots of it curated by our own partners. Detroit has an incredible wealth of arts and culture and talent, and so our goal at the Conservancy is really to uplift those voices and allow them to have a platform that is free and accessible so they can showcase what they do. We have kids who learn how to read with us at our reading program. We have kids who've learned how to skateboard with us and then head out to skate parks throughout the city. But it really is the idea that we have a taste of connecting with each other here on the riverfront that makes us so strong. Because I can go out and look out of my office and see an empty walkway, and it doesn't do anything. It doesn't bring us together, and it doesn't actually fulfill that mission of a connected riverfront because our neighbors are not enjoying it with us. So now you'll see our after photos. Our after photos full of people, right? People who are excited to experience this together. The Uniroyal site closed for 40+ years. If you guys saw the big Uniroyal tire when you guys came in, this is where they used to make those tires as they come in. And then we have Robert C. Villade Park, where you saw those cement silos, is now a beach and a barge. And if you're on our tour this afternoon, you'll grab a drink on that barge, really feeling the water underneath you, transforming that space. I made a note of the graffiti cans that we saw on the DeQuinder Cut. It's really important to us to also root ourselves back in the space and what its original intention had been. That graffiti is a part of its history. So through this, we've been able to curate murals on our DeQuinder Cut. And if you go on the Southwest Greenway, we've actually preserved graffiti for over 20 years in a space we call the Southwest Detroit Graffiti Museum. We've clear coated it, we've created it basically kind of a museum and an ode to what they left as well. And we also highlight the animals and the return to nature on both these sites. And then it's a place for us to gather, right? This is one of my favorites. We had a camping activity on the Cut a couple years in a row. And so just really pushing the boundaries of what we expect out of our public space. It's not just walking and biking. It's a place where I can see a group of folks enjoying a barbecue on the Cut, as well as connecting with folks they never would have expected. I think when we did this program, I expected a bunch of white hipsters to be down on the DeQuinder Cut, as you would expect, camping on the Cut. And instead, I had folks with mobility challenges. I had a lot of long-term Black Detroiters calling me, asking me if they could bring a fryer and bring a grill. And it was really incredible to see these communities come together, because no offense, the white people came with no food. The Black people came with all the food. And parties were formed. And then also back to this, and you'll hear Jamon speak about this, obviously celebrating what these spaces used to be as well. So this is our music series on the DeQuinder Cut, connecting into the Black Bottom neighborhood, because there's so many layers of history, and we can do and elevate what we've done together through this culture. And now the Southwest Greenway, open. I hope you guys take a walk on it to go check out our new park as well. Again, these active spaces. So far, as Matt alluded to yesterday, we've seen $2 billion of public and private investment in the riverfront and 3 million annual visitors. But I think most importantly, in our visitor survey, 100% of the zip codes in Detroit are represented visiting the riverfront. That's the most important thing to me. That's the most important thing to our staff. Because if they're not there, we are not doing our job. So we think about a lot of these transformational projects as tourist destinations. If you're coming back once, it's great. I'd love to have you back again. But more importantly, I'm going to build that community and ownership if I do it with my community members and my Detroiters. So a little bit of perspective. I think Asima had told me kind of the thought about this. I've showed you kind of the ugly back, when we were, before we were founded. I've talked a little bit about the good and how we've changed ourselves. But the Riverfront is a place that's going to be there for people in all different states. And specifically, over the last 4 years, we've all kind of gone through these moments of civil justice. We've gone through these moments of COVID. Detroit had some of the largest amounts of COVID deaths in the country. And so we have to recognize that these public spaces are also here for moments of need and grief. And we were able to do a COVID memorial project with our residents and collected over 4,000 handmade pouches that we did together on the Riverfront. We did it some of Ryan's programs as well. And really talk about what it meant to deal with loss. And I think this is important because for us, it was really important for us to be there for our community. But right now, as an organization, we're going through some internal strife. It's been very painful. It's been deeply painful for our staff. For lack of a better word, we feel like, we've been, discarded, abused, that kind of thing, And it's been really painful. And I think the one thing that's kind of kept our community and us feeling kind of on track, and our volunteers and those folks to still be here, is to remember that in the midst of all of this, we still have people out here actively enjoying the Riverfront. Because if they weren't mad at us, if they weren't mad at what had happened, it would show that they didn't care. And so sometimes when you have those feelings of anger, you really should embrace and take on that feedback. And so we expect ourselves to be better in the future. And I can tell you from just a couple days after the news broke of our embezzlement scheme, there were 500 plus Detroiters, seniors on the Riverfront ready to sign up for Riverwalkers, which is our senior walking program. And here's a photo of all of them lined up, ready to get their free t-shirts and ready to walk that Riverfront. And that's the thing that keeps us rooted and grounded in the work that we do and why it's so important. And I hope when you walk through moments of strife, you look at the people that you serve and are uplifted by them, because we sure have been. And our goal in the future is to continue to deliver on promises that we have. So we're building our largest park to date, which is Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Centennial Park, which is just a little over a half mile from here. And we will be opening this park in 2025. Again, it's an industrial site. We see the old Free Press newspaper factory there, as well as train lines. But instead of just church basements, we're heading to classrooms. We're asking our young people to help us decide what this park looks like and helping them envision, because they've seen a riverfront that's successful, what else we can do to make it even more successful. So here are some construction photos as you run through. It's really kind of coming and taking shape. And this space is going to be one of the best parks in Michigan, if not the best. And it's done because of the commitment of all the 20 years of work we've been able to do together. And it's exciting to think that these kids in this classroom who are molding clay have inspired playgrounds and equipment that looks like this. It's going to be sweet. And I'll take you with this last, there's nothing else to say. It's going to be sweet. Opening in 2025, so next fall, a year from now. But I'll leave us with this, is that our riverfront is best because we are better together. Our riverfront is best because we bring everybody. Our riverfront is best because it's been made by the folks who live in the city. And so when you think about your projects, make sure you hold that dear, because that's who you're serving, and they should always be at the forefront of every decision that you make. So thank you all.
Thank you, Rachel. Inspiring and wonderful. Really appreciate that candid conversation and presentation of the work that you should really be proud of. I'd now like to invite the rest of our panelists up to continue this conversation. First to the stage, I'd like to invite our moderator, Anika Goss, who is the CEO of Detroit Future City. We also have Ryan Myers-Johnson, the Executive Director of Sidewalk Detroit, Leona Medley, Executive Director, Joe Louis Greenway Partnership, and Jamon Jordan, historian for the city of Detroit, and founder of Black Scroll Network. Welcome, everyone.
See, thank you. Wow, we need another round of applause for Rachel. You killed that, girl. You were, man, that's amazing. So good morning, welcome. We're so glad to have you here. And this panel, I'm so excited about this discussion because this panel, these are the most important people in placemaking. So you're really, really fortunate to have them all. I haven't seen them all on one panel, so you guys are really in for a treat. And so before we start, I did want to talk a little bit about what placemaking could mean here in Detroit. And so what some of you may or may not know is that Detroit has 18 square miles of vacant land, and about 6% of the land here in Detroit is used for parks. And those of you already know that that's about half of what it should be for other cities in the United States. And, you know, over the years, parks and destination spaces are really important. In Detroit's lowest times, it's been our parks that have brought communities together. And it's interesting. I remember a story specifically about 5 or 6 years ago. You get to a certain age and everything is 5 or 6 years ago. It was much longer than that once you hear the story, but let's say it was 5 or 6 years ago. The state was taking over Belle Isle. How long was that actually in real life?
10, yeah.
Yeah, so 10 years ago. The state was taking over Belle Isle. And in the process of them taking over Belle Isle, and Belle Isle, as Rachel mentioned, it's an island park. It's a beautiful park. It's an island park in the middle of the Detroit River. Part of it you can see Canada. Canada is very close, and the other half you see Detroit. And Belle Isle, as they were doing, it was also a destination for long-term Detroiters. Long-term Detroiters have years of Belle Isle history, of partying there, barbecues during the day, convening. And then at night, it was like where you would drive around. It's a circular area, and there were, you hang out. It was a spot. It was a strip. And so in the process of taking it over, they removed all of the people you were no longer allowed to go there late at night. And people were angry about that, especially because most of those people were Black Detroiters. So the white Detroiters that lived near Belle Isle, because once the state took over, they turned it into a racetrack for the Grand Prix, right? And so the white Detroiters that lived near Belle Isle, that used Belle Isle, were like, what? We're going to protest. And they were angry. My friend was angry because the Black Detroiters weren't with them in the protest. And so I said to them, well, where were you when everybody got kicked off of Belle Isle? Now, you can debate whether or not people should be on the park after dark anyway. But the point is, this one park became the grounding for space, conversation, no matter what side you sat on. That's how important this park was. So I'm going to start with Jaman. If you could just ground us a little bit, continuing that conversation about the history of our parks here in Detroit and community spaces and what that means for us.
All right. Thank you, Anika. Hello, everyone. How y'all doing? Y'all in Detroit, so what up, though? All right, so it's good to see everybody here, and thank you for opening this with me, that question for me. So Detroit has had this history, this really fraught history of public spaces, and what we're here today to celebrate and to talk about is placemaking. So, and Belle Isle is a part of this long history, of this fraught history that in some cases is great, and in some cases is troubling. So, long before 1701, indigenous people were here, the Odawa, the Potawatomi, the Ojibwe, this Anishinaabe confederacy of Native Americans who were here. And they held Belle Isle and other places that they settled, that they fished, that they hunted, that they traveled. They held that as public spaces for the people. And the French arrived on July 24, 1701, and built 4 Pontchartrain du Detroit. They were led by Antoine Lomé de la Mosure de Cadillac, we say Cadillac in the city of Detroit. And he will build this fur trading fort, which will become the beginning of what will be a town and then later the city of Detroit. And the French will begin taking spaces because they need these spaces for fur trading, but of course the fur traders also need certain things. They need an infrastructure, they need food, they need clothing, they need homes. So now you're gonna have all those kinds of people coming. And Louis de Ville de Dequinder, we say Dequinder in the city of Detroit, will take possession of Belle Isle, which we've been talking about. And he will name it Île Cochon, which is French for Hog Island or Pig Island. He stores his pigs on the island. When the indigenous people had it, it was White Swan Island, but of course the swans will be run off the island once those pigs take really over the island. And that really begins the history of this battle for public spaces in the city of Detroit. So at one point, all of this land was meant for the people, and then at some point, it begins being held for some people. And by the time we get to the Great Migration, when hundreds of thousands of African Americans leave the South, coming to the North, the West, the East Coast, and of course Detroit, the Midwest, as they're coming here, there's neighborhoods they can't live in. Most neighborhoods in the city of Detroit, they can't live in. But the major neighborhood that they can live in is not far from the river. It is Black Bottom. And it's named that because of the creeks and rivers that run through the Lower East Side that deposit this dark soil all over that neighborhood. In fact, the major river that deposits that black soil is the beginning of the Dequinder Cut. So before it was the Dequinder Cut, it was the Savoyard River. And it is depositing this dark soil. And so that's the neighborhood they'll live in. They're living there because prior to them arriving there, many of the black leaders, many of the black churches, many of the people who were part of the Underground Railroad, that's where they were in the 1800s. So they're moving to a neighborhood that already has this long African-American history in the city of Detroit. But the public places, many of the public places, these black folks can't go to. So they can't go to Rouge Park when it's established later because it's an all-white park. They can't go to the major hotels and restaurants in the city of Detroit. They can't go to old Briggs Stadium, which is the old Tiger Stadium. They can't go, number one, Walter Briggs won't, he's defiant on having black players once Jackie Robinson integrates the major leagues. Detroit Tigers are the second to last team to field a black player. Only the Boston Red Sox is later than them. And he won't even, besides not having African-American players or black players, he won't let black people sit in the box seats inside of Briggs Stadium, the old Tiger Stadium. So public places, the hotels, the restaurants, when Hudson's is built, and we know the GM is going to be moving out of the Renaissance Center into the new Hudson site, but the old Hudson site, that was the J.L. Hudson's department store, the 13-story building. African Americans can only work there as janitors, doormen, and elevator operators. They can't try on clothes inside of Hudson's. When they go in Hudson's, if they buy something, they have to buy it off the rack and take it home. They can't try it on, and they can't bring it back. That's the history, the fraught history of public space in the city of Detroit. And so placemaking is activism for the black community. To respond to this segregation, this racism, this inequality, they create spaces. So there will be 350 black-owned businesses in a 12-block area known as Paradise Valley. This black business district will arise by the 1920s, and it's partly a response to African Americans being disallowed from being a part of the larger city of Detroit. They will create their own hotel since they can't go to the upscale hotels in the city of Detroit. They will create the Gotham, the Norwood, the Mark Twain Hotel. The Gotham is the 5-star black-owned hotel owned from 1943 to 1963. It is where it's a luxurious hotel. So it's not a flop house because people who have means, and African Americans are also people who have means, they want to be able to stay in the lap of luxury as well. And so public spaces and placemaking, for some people, it is a hobby. But for other people, it is a way of life. It is a way of responding to oppression. And so it is activism for the African American community to be a part of placemaking. And so if you're rooted in the city of Detroit, you need to be rooted in the history of what placemaking has meant for African American Detroiters. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jaman. I told you this would be a good panel. Liana, I'm wondering if we can turn to you because we're all so excited. The Greenway has started and people are already using it, but it's also under construction. And I know you've also talked about challenges and opportunities in the development of the Greenway. Maybe you could talk a little about that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that most keep me up at night is this idea that just building a public space like a Greenway will solve all of our issues, and just the building and the construction of it in itself. And there are no other interventions or things that we need to do. And so when I think about like the idea that when the Greenway was planned and the route and the alignment was selected, who owns the property was of major concern and major consideration around that. And aggregating those parcels and looking at where the city owned, and how do we make sure that those city-owned properties, we're thinking about policies down the future so that residents have the opportunity to benefit from this project. How do we think about the things that we're implementing to prevent property taxes on these houses as the value of the properties increase from skyrocketing, because these are the most important things to our aging residents who live in this neighborhood. It's great that you're building this Greenway and we love it, but I'm concerned about the property taxes because as I get older, my income is decreasing and my taxes are going up. How do we look at the neighborhoods knowing that we're a city that has had a bankruptcy in which we have had to close parks and we've had schools that have closed and shut down around these neighborhoods? How does the Greenway and the communities not become that new desirable community that folks start moving into and the residents that are there begin to see the change? And while they were there for the input on the Greenway, the input on the rest of the economic development they're not there for. And so that becomes the everyday concern that keeps me up at night. It's less about the trail and it's more about the people and how do we preserve that.
Excellent. Thank you. Ryan, I know that so much of your placemaking also centers around this engagement and connection to the people that will benefit and use the places, the parks, the open community spaces. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about moving beyond surface level engagement and really thinking about like how do you do that deep engagement alongside planning and policy work?
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, can I just say, wow, Jaman, every time I am sitting near you, I learn so much and I am just so inspired. And, you know, wow to everyone that's up here. I'm such an admirer of all of your work. In regards to how do we move past performative engagement, basically we started really thinking about how can we lead engagement processes that are trauma-informed. So our mission is to advance spatial equity through deep engagement with residents. And in working on the Greenway, on the Joe Louis Greenway, starting, I think about, see, I'm with you, how many years ago was it? But I think about 5 or so years ago, working with many of the folks in this room on how can we lead an engagement process that reckons with spatial trauma, that recognizes the blood that's in the soil and all of the trauma and inequity that led us to the place where we were. And so when we were thinking about not only bringing community members to the table on what the Greenway could look like, but also, as of late, working on that economic planning study for the neighborhoods that are around it. How do we move community members farther up the ladder of citizen participation? So one of our, sort of foundational texts is a theory of practice that focuses on bringing community members into more decision-making power, not performing engagement in terms of, just take this survey, what do you think? But really thinking about engagement and spatial planning as a way to not only heal spatial trauma, but to undo unjust systemic injustice that has happened to a lot of these neighborhoods. And so some of the things that we really want to do is really put the power in community members' hands. We've been deploying a method of community leadership teams, which could to you sound like advisory councils, but it's not. What we're really doing is giving community members those power, but also within that power, taking that trauma-informed approach, recognizing how these spaces came to be where they are. So we have these former trail lines that went through these Black and brown neighborhoods and destroyed them. And so it's not enough to say, we're gonna give you a great, beautiful green space. We have to reckon with how did we get there in the first place. And also, when we're in those meetings and community members show their passion, not being afraid of that, but diving deep into it. This community member is not just angry, and they are not a problem. Everything that they bring into the room is relevant because it's our responsibility as place builders, as city builders, as placemakers to own that trauma that has come before us. So even if we didn't create those problems, we have to recognize that we're in positions of power to not just solve it by paving over it, but to really deal with what has come before us.
That's right. Yes. Rachel, #1 riverfront in the world, in the United States, not in the world yet, almost. There's a theme that you hear in Detroit regularly. That's not for us. And you all have managed to move past and still be the #1 riverfront conservancy in the United States, and it be a beautiful space. How have you moved past that's not for us?
Yeah, I think for us, it's really showing people. Because for us, we started, obviously you saw those pictures of being in church basements, people not being able to see what they'd expect out of the riverfront, obviously being behind a corporate campus of General Motors. But how do we make sure that they're reflected in the river? And so a lot of that is the conversations that we have when we decide on programs. We find partners who might already be doing that in the city of Detroit who just need an elevated platform. Because at the end of the day, the riverfront is going to bring so many people in front of them. And so we're able to foster and kind of create this group of individuals who want to do outdoor programming. We have 7 miles of outdoor space, 2,000 square feet of indoor space. So we're constantly trying to fill and build an ecosystem. So you might be doing something up in Live 6, and then you're like, hey, I'd like to do it down here. And how do we highlight that? So that's kind of one of the main, major aims for us. And then also the sense of ownership. One of the things when I first started at the riverfront, I was really interested in just the fact that we are so interested in over-programming our spaces because we want people to have activities and things to do. But we spent a lot of time thinking about how we just let people be. So specifically around our winter programming, we just wanted to give you the tools to be successful outdoors. So for kids, it's sleds. For parents, it's hand warmers and hot toddies. And thinking about ways that we can kind of invite the community in, and then they see each other there, and then that's kind of how it grows.
I love that. So closing thoughts, and I could hear this from each of you. What places, and I'd like for each of you to answer, and we only have 53 seconds, so quick, Jamon. You have to be quick. What spaces should be reimagined, and what spaces should we actually demolish? Ryan, we'll start with you.
Wow, okay. I think that the question, let me just say, the question of demolition is really a curious one, and we got to talk about it a little bit. I think that sometimes when we think, and it's really quite a challenge in Detroit because we have so much blight. There's so many parts of the city that people look at as a problem that we need to just erase. And so I think especially when we look at a project like Michigan Central, there's a lot that we can go back and say, do we really need to just cover over our wounds, or are these places that can be healed? Are there spaces within community and within our infrastructure that we can look at this as not just, okay, adaptive reuse, or okay, it's economically viable, but what's the history there, and what are we actually trying to accomplish? And I think when we're moving forward with city building, rather than thinking, let's tear that down and build something new, we really do need to look at the mistakes and the challenges that city planning and policy has had to deal with, so that we don't just rebuild and create another cycle where in 30 years we'll also be thinking, what a mistake that we just tore that down and built something new. So I think those are the questions that we want to grapple with.
I mean, I could just defer to Ryan's response. I agree with that. I think that I have seen over and over again, and we had this conversation about the Renaissance Center. And, you know, while the Riverfront is amazing, and now you can access and see the river from the other side of the Renaissance Center, but when I grew up, the Renaissance Center was a fortress. It was a place that you did not have access to. There was no access from Jefferson. It made it difficult to get there. And so while I don't know that it needs to be demolished, I definitely think that it needs to be reimagined. But we grapple with this very tense history that we have in Detroit and across the country, and your cities too, with these spaces of what was the intention when they were built and how do we use them now. And I think it's the thing that just because you tear it down does not remove the trauma.
You know, I think for us, the Riverfront district, the warehouse district, is such like a fabric of what that experience is going through. And it's also a historical learning moment. And what I'd be concerned by of us, you know, erasing the whole thing and putting up a bunch of high rises is that we wouldn't have any memories of that history. And so, you know, Jamon tells stories, but also tells history, but so many of us in our own like families and cultures do not do that. So while I'm excited that kids get to go to Wilson Park and they don't get to think about the fact there was aggregate or a cement silo there, I also kind of want them to know, because I want them to know where we came from. So I think it's important to kind of hold those two things together. And then lastly, I'll say on the Southwest Greenway, it's cool that there's a train that pops up right next to it. It's a freight train that runs from Canada. At some point, I don't want that train to go away. I don't want that train tunnel to go away, because we expect that hopefully there's passenger rail coming through in the next couple of years, right? So we have to like imagine that, yes, it might have an industrial use, but it might have a person use later on.
All right, here I go. So I think the whole Riverfront, reimagine is not the word I would want to use, but I want an emphasis, because I'm a historian. I want an emphasis, and I think we need to first have it in our minds, but then have an emphasis on the history that binds us all together in the city of Detroit. That history is at the river. That's where the indigenous people, that was where they did most of their activity, at the river. When the French arrive and build Fort Pontchartrain, it's at the river. When the British take it over in 1760, it's at the river. The river is really the coming together spot of in Detroit's history. Just a little bit that way, I believe that's that way. You can see the Ambassador Bridge, which was designed by Cornelius Langston Henderson, an African-American engineer, the second African-American engineer to get his degree from the University of Michigan. He designed that one and the tunnel on the east side of the river front. And so as you're coming down the river and you get to what used to be Cobo Hall but is now Huntington Place, you have the site where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would lead 125,000 people down Woodward to Cobo Arena at that time and give a 30-minute speech which he will end with, "I have a dream." And he does that 2 months before he did it in Washington, D.C. Detroit heard it first. And so then if you go a little bit further down, you'll see the Gateway to Freedom International Underground Railroad Monument, because thousands of people came to the city of Detroit to get away from slavery in the South. And many of them had to leave Detroit to go over to Canada because of the fugitive slave laws of the United States. And that monument salutes the history of so many people who came from the city of Detroit. If you go a little bit further down, you'll get down to past the Renaissance Center, and then you get a little bit further east, and you get to the Outdoor Adventure Center. The Outdoor Adventure Center was a former dry dock. Henry Ford worked there before he began building cars and put the world on wheels. That's a historical spot. And then if you're at St. Alban and Atwater, there's a pylon just west of Aretha Franklin Amphitheater. And that pylon gives 3-panel history that gives you a whole breakdown of Detroit's African-American history. 3 of the UAW centers were or still are on the rivers. One of them, a couple of them aren't UAW anymore. But they were, so the unions, their center is at the river. There's so much of the history, whether we're talking about fur trading, whether we're talking about the auto industry, whether we're talking about the Underground Railroad, whether we're talking about bootlegging during the Prohibition years, the river is the center point. And so when we're talking about the riverfront, it needs to be a way that we can tell the story of the riverfront and tell that story in such a way that brings all Detroiters together, because that's the history of the river.
Okay, thank you. So we're gonna let's give our panelists a big round of applause. If they had their own way, this would be all you'd hear today, but there is another part of the conference, so I'm gonna turn it back over. Thank you.
Hello. I'm just going to run through some quick logistics because I know we're at time. Just really quickly, a breakdown of the room layouts. So on the 3rd floor, we have the plenary space. We also have Founders Lounge for those of you participating in the Executive Roundtable. On the 2nd floor, we have Shane Classroom for the workshops. On the 1st floor is where a majority of our spaces are going to be at the exhibit space, the event space, and Woodward Classroom. Woodward's a little hard to find. Ask for the giant sparkly elephant, and that's how you'll find it. There's bathrooms everywhere. Just ask one of the wayfinding people. What else? Oh, if you're in the network, we're going to take a photo at 12:30, right at lunch, so please meet us here. Lunch will be there and downstairs on the 1st floor. If you're a network member, please come here so we can take a photo. It'll be really quick. There's interviews being done on the 2nd floor also. So right by Shane, there's going to be a media room. Just ask for the media room. What else? Tours. The buses take off from New Lab to the tour sites. So if you're going on a tour, meet downstairs on the 1st floor. All of them are after lunch with the exception of Dream Troit. Dream Troit, Detroit-style pizza is included. So I think that's it. Yeah. There's a Michigan Central tour, which is new during lunch. Where's the meeting? At the reception desk. So if you want to tour Michigan Central Station, which is where we were last night, that'll be at 1 o'clock downstairs at the reception desk. Cool. Thank you, everyone.